Hey guys, Matt from Pomelo Pictures here, and we are back with another video in our In Conversation With series. This time I thought it was about time I got a female perspective to join the mix, so I'm joined this time by the ever lovely, ever colourful Kinsey Burke. Hey Kinsey, how's it going?
Hello.
It's just good. We
It's
finally.
going great. How are you?
I'm okay. I think there's a little bit of delay in us talking, but that's fine. Um, we finally got round to recording this after a while. We've been kind of putting it off for probably about a month now, but we kind of got around to it eventually. And just so you're aware, like people who haven't seen these videos before, pretty much every guest I've had so far has been in Washington, Washington State in the US, and there's an 8-hour time difference there. So we're filming this at just after 4 a.m. UK time. So this is how I look at 4
Oh my
a.m.
gosh.
But I think that played out last time when we the last video we did was with John Hancock, and I was doing a video about video games and education, which was one that I really wanted to talk to him about. But I think that was a little bit over ambitious for 4 in the morning here, so I rambled a little bit, and it kind of so we played it a little bit safe this time. We've gone for a slightly more low key topic, and that was games that made our childhood. And
Mhm.
this is one topic that I really wanted to speak to you about because, firstly, we're about the same age, so we grew up with the same kind of generation of games, but we grew up on different sides of the world. So
Yeah.
kind of really wanted to get that perspective of, yeah, just growing up with the same generation of game, but learning as well what someone else grew up with at the same time as me. And I guess the best place to start would be, I mean, what would you say is your earliest memories in gaming?
Earliest memories would definitely be the NES,
Hmm.
so the Nintendo original. And it's funny because actually when it came out, I was really young,
Hmm.
and my dad actually got it for himself. And the kids like weren't allowed to play it until he beat Zelda. That was like the whole thing. So I used to sit there with like the game hint book, the one that was like super like unofficial,
What was you just watching
and I
him
was
play?
like, yeah, and I was just totally helping, which I was like 3. I was not helping. But so once he beat Zelda, I actually got to play games, and that was like
And then it became
after
your
watching him
console.
for like yeah, for like hours, I'm just like, it looks so real. Like
Well, that
so
was the
after
thing,
that, I just like
they did look
yeah,
though. When those were the kind of only graphics you'd ever seen, they did look real.
yeah,
I think for
yeah,
me,
totally.
my first memory was it's actually technically I don't think it's even a game, but you know, being born in the late '80s, you couldn't really escape Tetris. And
Mm.
I always remember my granddad. He wasn't a gamer at all. He wasn't into video games or anything, but he always loved like crossword puzzles and those kind of things. And he had like a Tiger LCD Tetris clone,
Yeah.
and he would just play that until it broke, and then buy another one and just play that. And those were my sort of earliest memories of him just sat on the couch. No, everyone else in the room is being ignored while he's just playing a Tetris clone, and that's kind of my earliest memories because we never really had consoles in the house when I first grew up. My earliest memories are like
Mhm.
kind of in the arcade, really. Um, and I mean, what are your earliest arcade memories? I mean, you grew up in I mean, Seattle, for example, has got a huge arcade. And
Mhm.
you had, PAX's, the Penny Arcade Expo. Is that right? Have I got that bit?
Mhm.
So
Yeah,
I'm guessing your side of the world had a bit different experience with arcade than over here.
it did. And like, but I actually grew up outside of Seattle in
Hmm.
like a farm town. So basically, we didn't have an arcade, obviously. We barely had like a stoplight. So, but we had a place called Alfie's Pizza. And
Hmm.
Alfie's Pizza had like a little baby arcade where it had like 3 machines in a
Hmm.
corner. And that was like, it had Off-Road and it had Galaga, and had never going to an arcade before. I remember when I walked back there, I mean, it was probably like 3 machines, but
Yeah.
I was like, whoa, there's so many video games in here. And I spent so much money playing Off-Road. And sometimes I was young enough where I would just like hold the steering wheel, and I didn't put a quarter in it,
You just sit there.
but I'm just like, yeah.
Well, that was the thing. I mean, when I was growing up, our arcade was actually attached to the bowling alley. So, and the bowling alley was then attached to the cinema. So it's kind of like everyone that you knew convened there. There was restaurant, cinema, bowling alley, arcade, and a lot of my earliest memories of anything are actually in that arcade. It's sad these days that it's actually gone. But I remember, even because everyone in my family would play, because they all, you'd have the little coin slot machines, and then you'd have. I'd be on the racing games pretending I could drive, like sitting and not really able to reach the steering wheel. But some of those are my earliest memories, because like I say, I didn't really have a console as such when I was growing up. I mean, you say your first one was the NES. Was that the console that you would say you grew up on, or was that just the first one?
That's really just the first one, because I was really young when that came. It came out in 1985.
Sure.
And so did I. So, like...
It's before I was born.
Yeah. But after that, I got a Genesis.
Mm.
And I was still pretty young for that. That's when I was like 5.
Yeah.
So I still wasn't playing the best games. So I think the consoles that like shaped my childhood would be more like the Nintendo 64 and the PlayStation 1.
Yeah.
Because that was when I was like 10, 11, 12. When, like, I don't know, I could play games. I wasn't just playing my Game Boy all the time.
Yeah.
And I felt like that's when I started playing more like RPGs.
Mm.
And now that's my absolute favorite genre of video games ever.
Yeah.
And so I remember the Christmas when I discovered Final Fantasy. And that was a good Christmas.
I think it's something a little bit similar for me, because I mean, for me, I was born right at the end of the 80s, but my sisters grew up in the 80s, and for a lot of people in Britain in the 80s, you tended to grow up more with computers than with consoles. So we always had an Atari ST. With not the best games. We had like James Pond and those kind of things, and those are the games that I really grew up on. But and Game Boy was kind of when I always grew up with. Those were kind of my favorite. That was my favorite system, and those were my favorite games. But when the N64 hit was when I started to feel like, oh, these are for me. These games are for me. Like I remember, it was Christmas morning, and I got an N64 with GoldenEye packed in. And my first color TV for my room. Like hadn't had a color TV before.
Nice.
And it was just like, oh my god, what is this? Why have I been avoiding video games? Like, because I never had the NES, Super Nintendo, Mega Drive. I never had them. And then suddenly I was like, I've missed so much. It's like my mind was blown. It's like, and I put GoldenEye in, and I had no idea how to play. And I just remember I was dead to the world for like the whole 2-week school holiday. I was just like, no one speak to me.
Yeah.
So I mean, for you,
you were the N64 kid.
Exactly.
N64.
Yeah, if you can picture that photo, but slightly fatter kid from England, that was me. So yeah, I didn't actually have that many games, but I mean, for you, so N64 and PlayStation, if those were the consoles that kind of shaped your childhood, and you go into RPGs and things, but I would say, what would be the games that shaped your childhood then?
Definitely Ocarina of Time, Zelda, because actually there was a period of my like childhood where I didn't play games. What? I know. I thought horses were cooler.
No, I think we all had that, but yeah. So would you say that the N64 was one of those consoles? Well, not necessarily the N64, but Ocarina of Time was one of those things that brought you back into gaming.
Oh, 100%. Because I remember I got to when I had a little brother, and at a certain point I was like, whatever, games are for kids. This was a very short period of my life where I was like doing horse stuff.
I was a horse riding kid as well. I'll put a photo up on the screen of me on a horse that's way too big for me on the screen anyway. But a little side, keep going.
I have a picture very similar to that. I got home from school and my little brother was trying to beat Queen Goma, the first boss of Ocarina of Time. And I was like, fine, I'll help you, you know? And then I was like, what is this game?
Mm.
And then I remember like walking out onto Hyrule Field for the first time,
Yeah.
and I was just like, what is this? What have I been missing?
Yeah.
And then I got back to playing games, and that's all I did.
Well, I'd say it was something pretty similar for me, but I mean, for Zelda, for example, that was something that completely passed over me. I wasn't aware of Zelda at all until
Mm.
quite a lot later in life, and it was actually my sister went off to university, and she came back at the end of the year, and I was like, here's your N64. I was like, my N64's in the corner, and it just turned out she'd just stolen her roommate's N64 and had all these games like Ocarina of Time and Mario Kart 64 and Mario 64. I was like, no, it's fine, I'll take it. So
Yeah.
I actually didn't really discover it until a lot later. I was kind of, because again, I wasn't aware of. I guess when you're a kid, you don't really know, but I wasn't aware of the huge catalogue of games available.
Oh yeah.
I got GoldenEye and a couple of others, and I was kind of like, well, this is me sorted then. That's me. It's Mario 64, GoldenEye. There's nothing else. Why would anybody need anything else?
Yeah.
And then there was a local video rental store that also rented out games, and I rented out the PS1, and there were no games. All the games were rented out, but they only had a console. So I rented the console, and then I went and bought a magazine which had a demo CD, and then the whole weekend I just played the Spyro demo, and it was kind of like Spyro the Dragon and all these other games, and it was kind of like that revelation of wow, this is because it was when things had kind of transitioned to 3D. Obviously, like PC had 3D a little bit longer, but it's kind of this transition. Oh, it's not just 2D Mario and Sonic games. There's this whole other thing. And yeah, Zelda was one of those ones where I kind of wish I'd had that experience when I was because it is just this vast open world thing that you wouldn't get in any other game, and it's kind of that's one of the games that I'd kind of missed.
Yeah.
But with all the amazing games that we had as our childhood, we all had like those really bad games too. I mean, I'm sure. I mean, I didn't have that many, but I'm sure you did. What would you say would be the games that you had in your collection that you would never go back to?
Actually, when I got my Sega Genesis or Mega Drive, I was really into like because I was still really young when that came out. I think I was like 5 or 6, and I was super into horrible 90s mascot games. I loved them.
Everyone did.
Yeah, like Chester Cheetah.
Oh, see, that's one we didn't get. We don't have Cheetos in the UK, so
Oh, really?
I'm so sad we never. Well, no, we do now, but we never had it in the 90s. So that's one that unfortunately we never got our hands on.
Yeah, I mean, you weren't missing much.
Okay, well, I'm glad. For me, it's kind of a weird one, like because I know a lot of people love it. It's one of those games that has been re-released and like great. But where is it? I've got it here. It is. Turok 2. I don't know if you can see that on my camera here. This is a game that like loads of people love, but this is one that I got with my N64. It's kind of like when you buy a console and they'll be like, oh, you can have one of these thrown in, and it's the ones that they can't sell. I popped it in and I was just like, I don't know what this game is. I don't know how to play it. I don't know the controls. And it's one of those ones that it's really weird because it got re-released on Steam recently, and everyone was raving about it. It's like, have I missed something? This is one game that this would be at the bottom of a toy box somewhere for 10 years. And it's one that I have to revisit really, but I might have to get my hands on Chester Cheetah now you've said it. I feel like I want to try it.
It's not good, but he wears sunglasses.
Well, that makes up for everything.
I know, right?
So you talked about sort of Ocarina of Time being one of those games that brought you back to gaming, and I think it's quite common for gamers to sort of go away from games for a while and then come back to them. I mean, are there any other examples of games that you had that brought you back to gaming after like a long period away?
Probably actually when I started playing Final Fantasy, because I didn't actually start playing Final Fantasy until the PlayStation 1.
Hmm.
And I got a PlayStation 1 for Christmas, and this is still during my like because it was weird. Growing up, I didn't have a lot of friends who played games.
Hmm.
So sometimes it made it really hard to like stick to it because I didn't have like, the situation where friends would come over and we'd all play Mario Kart.
Yeah, yeah.
Not really. Like I played with my little brother, sometimes with my sister when she wasn't too cool for games. And like but then I got Final Fantasy 7. No, I got Final Fantasy 8, Final Fantasy 9, and then I
Hmm.
got a gift card. And the gift card I bought Final Fantasy 7.
Hmm.
And so all for one Christmas. And I was just like, all right, this is my life now.
Yeah, that would keep you
And
busy for a while.
yeah, and I played Final Fantasy 9 first
Hmm.
because I thought the cover was cute. And I just got so sucked into that game. And after that, I played 8. After that, I played 7. And then I just like kept going down the Final Fantasy rabbit hole. And like when 10 came out, I was super excited, bought a PS2. Like,
That's another game that I've never delved into because it's one that I missed first time around. I'm always afraid to delve into it because there's so many of them and it's such a kind of rich lore behind it.
yeah.
It's one that I'm always scared to dive into. But Final Fantasy VII was one that I'd always hear people talking about. And
Hmm.
obviously I know about it now, but it's kind of those ones that I never dived into. Um,
Hmm.
but for me, like obviously I've spoken about GoldenEye as well. But when I was growing up, for me, my favorite console was always the Game Boy, and
Hmm.
that had such a long lifespan. Like when I first got it, obviously I was playing things like Super Mario Land, Super Mario Land 2, Alleyway, Tetris, and that thing. And then kind of I went away from a bit and from it for a little bit, and then I guess it's probably about 10 years later. We went on a school trip for a week away, and I was staying in a room with three of my friends, and they all had this game that I'd never heard of called Pokemon, and and they one had red, one had blue, one had yellow, and I was just like, what is this thing? I was like, and like for the whole week, I was like, can I play your game and just not save? So I spent a week playing through playing the first little bit with Professor Oak over and over again, playing wherever each person was in their game over and over again until I finally got my version of it, and I think I ended up buying all three of them in one go.
Yeah.
And it was just kind of like that revelation of I've got to try this thing. Why have I not known about this thing? Um, and it was the same like growing up. Like when I was sort of went to university and things, I kind of forgot about gaming a little bit. We had like an N64 and things in our living room because I was like, yeah, we play retro. Who needs new games? And
Hmm.
then the guy living on the ground floor had an Xbox 360, and he's like, no, come and play like Left 4 Dead. And I was like,
Oh, yeah.
and I was like, oh, okay, I've missed a few things, and then I kind of got back into it completely because it kind of goes in waves sometimes. You go away from it, and then I mean, it doesn't go in waves anymore. We're both sitting in front of shelves full of games, but there were those periods. It's like I don't need games, and like when I first moved to London as well, because there's no space in London. You'd have like a tiny little apartments. I threw
Hmm.
away loads of game cases and things, and I just had a few in like a sleeve. I was kind of like, I've got no room for games. How can
Hmm.
any I have room for games? I'm in this tiny apartment. And then, yeah, when we moved into a bigger house, there's kind of this happened. Uh,
Yep.
so it comes in waves.
Yep.
But like I
Definitely.
said, yeah, with things like Zelda and Final Fantasy, those were kind of games that I missed the first time round.
Mhm.
Are there any examples of games that you just completely missed and you kind of discovered later on in life?
Yeah, definitely. The whole Super Nintendo library,
Just the whole library.
the whole thing. Because like I never had a Super Nintendo as a
Mm.
kid, and like I had one friend who had a Super Nintendo, and I used to go over to her house, and I'm like, "Can we play like Donkey Kong Country? Can we play Mario?" And she was like, "Let's play Monopoly."
She was kind of
And
done
I was
with it.
like, "Ugh, God." So I played a lot of Monopoly on the Super Nintendo, but that's like the only thing I ever played. So I missed all of those wonderful like SquareSoft RPGs.
Mm,
I didn't play Secret of Mana until like 10 years ago. Like
mm.
I'm just now like getting back into all these things that I missed because that's a really big backlog. And
Yeah,
I already have a big backlog. Like
everyone does. You can't really
yeah.
escape backlogs.
Yeah, but I remember like because like you were saying about renting games.
Mm,
I did that as well because I really only owned like for my Genesis I had like 4 games. I had
yeah.
like 4 games for my NES. Like I didn't have very many games, but I rented a lot of games. And I just
Mm.
remember like walking by the Super Nintendo section, like I was just like,
One day.
one day, one day. But I played some bad games by renting them too because like
Mm.
I would go really late, and then I'm like,
They're all
nothing
gone.
good left at 8 p.m. on a Friday. Like,
That was
so I did that a lot.
that was one thing I had. It wasn't a bad game, but I'd go to the rental store and there would be the ones that I wanted were never there. So I always had my go-to
Mhm.
game that I liked, but no one else did. And I think I forget the name of it because it's got different name in the US. I think it's called Jet Moto in the US on the PS1.
Yeah.
It was a game that nobody ever checked out. So it was like I'd always go and for whatever game I wanted was gone. It was like, okay, I guess it's that one again. And
Yep.
when the store closed down, as all rental stores eventually did in the end, sadly, I bought that copy of Jet Moto because it was kind of like they were doing a clearance sale. Everything was going, and it's kind of like there were the last few things. There were a few VHS tapes, and Jet Moto. I was like, I think I'll take that one, and it's on my shelf somewhere. It's kind of like
Oh, that's awesome.
my video rental store copy of a game that no one wanted. So it's kind of like I have nostalgic memories of that game, even though it's not the best game in the world, but it's okay.
I
Um,
played a lot of like Snowboard Kids and
mm,
Snowboard Kids 2 on the 64 because they were usually there, and Buck Bumble on the
Buck
64.
Bumble. I've never heard of that
Yeah,
one.
nobody knows.
Was Snowboard Kids the one where there's a little fat kid that sort of just does a as he falls over?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
Like all the other characters are like, yeah, let's go. Like they have words,
Hmm.
and he's like, like whenever he like hits something or like does something good, he doesn't have words. And like
That's
I
all
always
you
think
need.
about that guy.
If someone can
Yeah.
emote without words, that's fine.
He just like grumbles. Like it's pretty good.
Another one for me was it's actually now one of my favorite game series, and it's Kirby.
Mm-hmm.
I missed Kirby growing up. Like now, I have a complete Kirby collection. I did a video on my channel of that. That was my first complete collection of games that I got. But it's because
Oh, awesome.
it's a game that I only really discovered a few years ago, and it's because I think I don't know, maybe growing up I thought it was a bit too kiddie, and then
Mm-hmm.
I started playing it. It's like, oh my god, this is awesome.
Yeah.
The first game is a little, it's a little bit simple, but I got a 2DS because I'd been like the DS Pokemon games and things kind of disappoint me a little bit, and I kind of went away. It's another one that I came back to, and I got a 2DS with Pokemon XY and Kirby Triple Deluxe. I was like, it was another one of those moments. I was like, oh my god, I've missed so much. I need the whole back catalogue now.
Yep.
You were saying that yeah, you never had the Super Nintendo growing up. You had the NES, but you only had a few games. But something that's kind of very hot topic, I guess, at the moment is these things, which are retro mini consoles. And I kind of wanted to get your opinion on these as a retro gamer and also a game collector. I mean, what is your view on these, kind of the trend of these mini consoles now?
I mean, I think they're awesome. I know some people are like, well, I have all those games.
Yeah.
And for some of them, I do have all those NES titles. But like,
Mm.
I don't know, something about them is just, it's so cute and little and and I found you can really, since it's so small,
Yeah.
I've actually taken it on a few vacations.
Mm.
Then I have all those games. I can just hook it up to the hotel room TV.
Yeah.
And like, so it's actually really nice for that.
Yeah, because they are kind of polarizing a little bit because I mean emulation's been around since the 90s anyway,
Yeah.
and you can just build a retro Pi and there's virtual console and things, but I mean, one thing that I didn't get the NES Classic, but I got the Super Nintendo Classic, and one thing that I realized when I first plugged it in is kind of like, okay, this is kind of how it should be. Like, you obviously it's a nice experience to have a CRT TV and the original console and a
Mhm.
cartridge and things, but emulation can be a bit shaky sometimes. A lot of the USB controllers aren't that great, and it was really nice to be able to just plug it in and play it. And obviously, it's also, I mean, it's so easy to hack and put whatever games you want on it, or put like homebrews on it and play it like a proper Super Nintendo. Um, but it's just a shame that I did a video a while ago about the At Games Mega Drive or At Games Genesis, and John Hancock's done loads of these because he seems to have every iteration of the one that they've ever made. And
Yeah.
it's a shame that after so long, consoles aren't, because particularly with that one, like if you went to a store and adults with their kids that go, oh, I grew up with this console, let's buy this retro throwback thing, and then they take it home and it's awful. It kind of
Oh,
it's a really
yeah.
bad introduction to those games. So I'm glad that Nintendo have made these consoles. Obviously, they could have made them in higher numbers,
Yeah.
but um, the one thing for me, actually, it was going to be it's a question for you, but the one thing for me is I think the console that I would be most interested in would be an N64 Mini.
Yeah.
Um, and for a number of reasons. Firstly, I mean, the biggest thing is probably the controller because it's not the best controller in the world. And certainly like USB ones are awful. If you try and find a USB N64 controller, don't even bother. And also
No,
the
they're
fact
horrible.
that a lot of the games need their own BIOS, so emulating doesn't really work sometimes. So I think out of all of them, that would probably be the one I'd be interested in. But I'd be interested to see kind of what your opinion on what you would be interested in seeing.
Yeah, I mean, definitely a mini N64.
Mm.
That would be awesome. Because, like you were saying, like all third party well, most. There's like
Yeah,
a
there are a
very
couple of
few
exceptions.
things,
Yeah.
but most of like third party Nintendo 64 controllers are crap.
Mm-hmm.
Like pretty much all of them. So, I mean, yes, it's kind of like an emulator, but you're still playing on original Nintendo hardware.
Yeah,
And I would assume that the controllers would also be up to that caliber. So,
I would assume
maybe
so.
even better.
I would assume they wouldn't do what they did with this with the Famicom Mini and make like a mini version of the controller.
Oh, I saw that.
But I've just got visions of this. My favorite color is orange, and I've just got this vision of this little fantastic orange N64 Mini sitting on my desk, and that would be. I would probably day one as soon as you couldn't get me on the website quick enough to pre-order that. I was like, no, that one for me, and that's all I need. Just the little fun. And if I could hack it and put, because obviously one sad thing about these things is obviously you can hack them, but there
Mhm,
are third party games that we miss out on because it's licensing would
mhm,
be too much and so on. Um, like for example, for me, GoldenEye, I wouldn't be able to have that experience just
mhm.
getting an N64 because chances of them getting the rights from MGM and from Rare and also from Pierce Brosnan, which they would need, and it probably wouldn't happen. But if I could hack it, then that's fine. But yeah, I've just got this vision of this little bright
Yeah.
orange see-through plastic. So I don't know about you, but growing up in the night as a '90s kid, I'm such a sucker for see-through, clear perspex anything. It's just if they made anything in clear
Yep.
perspex, yeah, I'll have
Me
that
too.
version as well.
Yeah. Yeah,
Um,
I remember growing up like in every like movie or anything, the kid who had a phone in their room, it was always that clear plastic one.
or a
Always.
cheeseburger. Basically, if I could
Yeah.
have
Oh yeah, choose my phone. Yeah.
if I could have the bedroom from Clarissa Explains It All, that would be my dream bedroom.
Yeah.
um,
Yep.
well, I think that was pretty much everything that we were going to talk about. I think, this is, as I say, this is one of the topics that I really wanted to talk to you about, because a lot of your videos as well are, not necessarily just videos that you do on your channel, but whenever you appear on Jason Metal Jesus' channel, especially to do with the N64 and things. There's an enthusiasm about it because it's great that retro gaming is a big thing at the moment. But at the same time, it's kind of hard to put into perspective. The games now don't play the same as they used to, if that makes sense. Kind of, say for example, Zelda. I could pick up Ocarina of Time now and I could play it, but it's not the same as having someone say, when they first played it, they looked at it and was like, oh my god, the grass is so real and everything's, it kind of puts into perspective just what those games were, because this is one thing I was talking about with John Hancock. We had a kid come over and I showed him some of the early games and he'd play them and he'd be like, this isn't very good. And it's kind of like, no, but you don't understand. You don't understand. You could put 4 controllers in this thing, and like this little CRT TV would be split into 4, and it was amazing. You don't know what you're missing with your Overwatch. But yeah, it's nice to be able to have these conversations with people that kind of grew up with the same systems but different games, and get their memories of them. And you only really get that from having a kind of sit down conversation with them rather than just watching their videos. So I think that'll probably do it for this video. Thank you, Kinsey, for joining me. I know we've had a few connection problems, so sorry, apologies if the video's been a little bit broken up, but I guess internet doesn't really want to work at 4 in the morning either.
I don't blame it.
I don't blame it either. I'm probably going to go off to bed after this. But again, thank you for joining me. And I will put a link to Kinsey's channel in the description below. Please like and subscribe to both of our channels. And yeah, again, thank you, Kinsey, again for joining us for this video.
Of course, anytime. It was super fun.
Yeah. See you later, guys. Bye.